Good morning, everyone. Today we are continuing our exploration of that wonderful historical train wreck that was the League of Nations, an institution that emerged after World War I to preserve world peace, but failed miserably in more than one way. Today's topic in particular is a couple of important international agreements, the Treaty of Locarno and the Kellogg-Briand Pact, which made the League look even more useless. As a historian, I know perfectly well that the League was not really useless. It was a fundamental stepping stone in achieving the international balance that we have today, the United Nations, and a system in which declaring war and turning a dispute between two countries into an all-out conflict is extremely difficult for a number of reasons. Nevertheless, the League at the time had several problems, and we have explored some of them already. The lack of armed forces, the lack of American presence, the lack of inclusion for the Soviet Union and Germany, the Republic of Weimar, and a bunch of other issues. Today we will be looking first at the Treaty of Locarno, second at the Kellogg-Briand Pact, then at the impact those treatises had on the League's credibility. And then I will provide you a model answer, and you will have to answer today's question, which is, let me find it, the Kellogg-Briand Pact and the Locarno Treaty strengthened the League of Nations. How far do you agree with this statement? I would like you to answer this question. Now, moving on, the Treaty of Locarno of 1925. First of all, we should start by defining what is an international treaty. An international treaty is essentially a contract between countries, two or more, an agreement in which countries promise certain actions. I will do things. I will give you resources, or more often they promise not to do certain things, like I will not invade you, I will not give weapons to your enemies, these sort of things. And usually there are some consequences in place if the promise is not respected. So if you give weapons to my enemies, then this other country is allowed to declare war. If you attack me, then I got all these other people to protect me, or I will stop trading with you. There are all sorts of consequences, generally, if one of the promises in the treaty is not respected. In this case, we're talking about the Treaty of Locarno, again in 1925. Most European countries met in the Swiss town of Locarno, in the Italian part of Switzerland, in 1925, to try and fix some of the issues that emerged in the Peace of Paris and the Treaty of Versailles. The location is quite important, because Switzerland, which you know from chocolate and cuckoo clocks, is also famous for a third thing. It's always been neutral. It did not take part in World War I, and later it will not take part in World War II, and it always had, since essentially the 1600s, it always had the reputation for being a country that did not want to take side. What did this mean? Symbolically, it meant that meeting in a place that none of the countries that signed the treaty could call home meant that all the countries were treated equally. You were not signing a treaty between Germany and France in either Germany or France. It's like playing a football game neither in your own home stadium nor somewhere else, nor in the opponent's home stadiums. You're playing in a third stadium, which means that both parties are on the same ground. It's a symbolical thing, but it was still an important aspect. There were several treaties signed at Locarno, if my memory doesn't cheat me, should be 7, and they involved almost every European country. It was the occasion where people tried to fix the mistakes, fix the oversights that were in the treaties of Versailles. The most important, however, was the one between France, Germany and Belgium. You might remember these three countries for being at the very center of World War I. How did Britain get dragged in World War I? Germany invaded France, and to invade France it had to pass through Belgium. Britain guaranteed the neutrality of Belgium. Why? Because Belgium is literally on the other side of the channel, and if you control Belgium you can control access to Britain, which is very important, so Britain entered the war on the side of France. Why did Germany invade France? That is an incredibly complex and long story, which we will not go into here. But the general gist of the situation is that in the Treaty of Locarno in 1925, after 6 years from the Peace of Versailles, from the Treaty of Versailles, Germany promised to accept and respect the new borders established after the war. All the territories that France had taken, Germany stopped saying, they are mine. It said, okay, they are France. I'm okay with that. Also, they promised not to invade France or Belgium, or vice versa, meaning that France and Belgium promised not to invade Germany. The other two Allied powers, Britain and Italy, promised to intervene if any of those three countries broke the treaty. So if France military invaded Germany after 1925, then Britain and Italy would intervene. If Germany invaded France after 1925, which it did, but that's a whole different thing, Britain and Italy promised to intervene. This was before Germany and Italy became allied in the Axis, so much before World War II. Germany and Italy were still not allied. So, this happened for the western borders of Germany. An agreement was found and those borders were stabilized. In the west, the borders with France. However, similar assurances that invasion would not be going on did not happen for Poland, for the border with Poland, which remained an extremely contentious issue until 1945, essentially, and would cause the beginning of World War II in 1939. So this is an important omission of the Treaty of Locarno. Moving on to the Kellogg-Briand Pact. The Kellogg-Briand Pact was also a treaty, but unlike the Treaty of Locarno, it was much bigger in scope. It started as an idea of the US Secretary of State, Franklin B. Kellogg. Secretary of State is the member of the cabinet, the member of the government who is in charge of dealing with other countries, of essentially creating and implementing the strategy of one country towards the others, okay? And the French Foreign Minister, Aristide Briand, who was, yes, again, the Foreign Minister, the person who was in charge of connecting France with the other countries outside. Why did they sign this pact? They wanted to involve America in international politics and in a system of collective security, even if the United States at the time were very isolationist and refused to be part of the League. Germany was not invited, the Soviet Union was not invited, the United States said, I'm not joining. Now, collective security here is a very important concept in this period and even today. It means that many countries agreed to help each other if one of them was attacked, regardless of the reason. This is why they wanted to get America into the system of collective security, because America was shaping up to be the world's largest military power. It was already the world's largest economic power, but from economic to military power there is a very short distance. Ask China. The text of the treaty was very generic. Okay? 61 countries simply agreed to avoid using war as a mean to solve controversies. It was not specified what they would do instead. There was no clause saying if someone declares war, then this list of things will happen. No, it was simply we will not wage war, and that's pretty much it. It was more like a declaration of intention rather than a proper treaty. So, I hear you asking yourself, but we are supposed to talk about the League of Nations. We are supposed to talk about how useless the League of Nations was. And that's the next point. These two international agreements might sound like a good news. After all, they try to solve one of the most important issues of the 1920s, the relationship between France and Germany, and also try to involve the American government in international relations after they had chosen to self-isolate because they just couldn't handle all these quarreling Europeans and their endless squabbles. And this is why they did not join the League of Nations. They wanted America to stay away from Europe and from all the mess that could come up of Europe and that did come out of Europe eventually. However, they were bad for the image of the League of Nations and for its credibility for one reason. The League was created to provide a space for dialogue and for the peaceful resolution of controversies, but it was not doing its job. It did not include powerful countries like Germany and the Soviet Union at the beginning, or the United States. Germany had been blamed for the war and was not allowed. The Soviet Union was seen as a dangerous communist state, and nobody likes communists, so we will not invite them in our club. And the United States refused to join because they did not want to get involved, as we said, into the quarrels of the Europeans. Therefore, agreement with those powerful countries must be made outside the League. And an agreement was also absolutely necessary to ensure that world peace held, at least for a while. Without Germany agreeing to calming down on its claims on France, and without America saying, okay, I'm here and in case I might intervene if something goes wrong, peace was more in danger. So, if to do anything important, they needed to work outside the League of Nations. They needed to sign treaties and pacts that did not involve the League in any capacity, but instead was the old diplomacy of countries dealing with one another and solving the issues with one another instead of referring to the Council of the League of Nations, instead of going to the Assembly of the League of Nations and so on. Why did they have the League of Nations in the first place? A lot of people started to wonder. So, those were more or less the essential facts. Now I will read the model answer, and I would like to read your answers to the question: the Kellogg-Briand Pact and the Locarno Treaty strengthened the League of Nations. How far do you agree with this statement? So, here comes the model answer. I disagree with this statement because both the Treaty of Locarno and the Kellogg-Briand Pact were made necessary by the limitations of the League of Nations. The Treaty of Locarno in 1925 was an attempt to stabilize the relationship between France and Germany after the war and the Peace of Paris. Germany recognized its western borders and promised not to attack France or Belgium. Both Italy and Britain promised to intervene if one of the countries was attacked. The responsibility to ensure international peace, however, was supposed to be a prerogative of the League of Nations and not of individual countries. Nevertheless, the League could not intervene because Germany was not part of it. The actions of those countries outside the institution of the League of Nations made it look ineffective. Something similar can be said about the Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1928. The pact was more ambitious and asked 61 countries to reject the use of war in the solution of international disputes. It was an American idea, made necessary by the fact that the United States had not joined the League of Nations, but still wanted and needed to play an active role in international diplomacy. Like Locarno, the Kellogg-Briand Pact reduced the credibility of the League of Nations. To conclude, both pacts made the League look superfluous and useless, since pacts of collective security had to be signed outside of its institution. So here was the model answer. I'm looking forward to read your answers and see you next time.